Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Turin here with another Warhammer Total War online commentary. In this particular battle, I'll be playing the Dwarves, and I'm going to be facing off against the Warriors of Chaos. So definitely going to be fun, and this is one of my more archetypal builds with the Rune Lord and the double Runesmith, so hopefully you guys don't mind that, but I found it to be pretty effective in this meta, but I do have a few fun units as well, so hopefully you guys will enjoy this. So as far as my front line goes, I have the Grumbling Guard, who are an excellent unit, pretty outstanding stats, 46 melee defense, which is really high for a kind of a traditional great weapon unit. If you go ahead and look at the Longbeards with great weapons, the regular ones, they actually only have 35, so it's a pretty big difference there. They also have 34 weapon strength, so it's the same in that respect, but they also have that really good vigor aura, which makes a big difference in these long, atrocious battles, which tend to be the case with the Dwarfs because, as their base leadership is really high. If you can see, the buffed leadership of all these units right now is actually over 100, so it's pretty serious business, guys. So in my secondary line, I have two groups of Dwarf Warriors. So normally I don't like to bring kind of shielded units against Warriors of Chaos, but these guys do have charge defense against large foes, so in case you did bring Chaos Knights or anything like that, I wanted to have these guys as kind of sacrificial fodder in the wings. They're very cheap. Originally, I actually had an extra group of Longbeards here, but Longbeards really get punished by charges, and Chaos Knights with Lances can do pretty well against them, and even regular Chaos Knights. So I wanted to have some units that had charge defense, but obviously with the way this game turned out, I definitely wish I had more Longbeards. So with great weapons. So I have those guys. In the center, I have the Peak Gate Guard, very good unit. I decided to just go straight kind of Death Star, just heavy armor piercing, Rune Lord, all that kind of fun business. So these guys are definitely a nice accentuation to that. So I also have a Thane. I have some Dwarf Warriors with great weapons back here because I essentially ran out of money. Of course, I have the Dragonback Slayers. So I do like Dragonback Slayers in this matchup. Pretty good against like Kolek, and they're great against Manticores. So if you can get them in the right place, they'll fight to the death, and they have pretty darn good stats. They have 58 melee attacks, so they're going to be making some solid contact. So kind of the plan is just to kind of form a little death blob, get the perpetual buffs of the Rune Lord, and then spam Rune of Wrath and Rune, which is always a fun time to watch for you guys, I hope. So he's got two Manticores. He actually has a ton of chevrons, so if you guys go ahead and take a look, these Manticores are pretty juiced. They're ready to party, and they do cause terror, and a lot of my units, I don't know, are Longbeards, are they immune to psychology? I'm totally blanking on that. I think they actually are, so that actually works out pretty well for me. So they do have terror. They should be able to frighten the Dwarf Warriors and those other guys, so still not terrible. And then the rest of his army, it's pretty interesting. He actually has all Chaos Warriors, which are pretty good infantry. They're hard-hitting, good stats, good armor, just very well-rounded, but they also all have 3 chevrons in them. So his entire front line has 3 chevrons, so definitely more of an elite Chaos army. I actually thought they were chosen at first, but it turns out they were just chevron to Chaos Warriors. He also has Kolek Sun Eater, and he also has the Lore of Death, and it looks like he only has Soul Blight, which is one of the few abilities that's pretty good against the Dwarves. It lowers your offensive stats, it lowers armor and leadership, so it hits on a lot of the key points of the Dwarves. And last but not least, he does indeed have a Gorebeast Chariot. So these things are pretty miserable to fight against as the Dwarves. Thankfully, the Master Rune of Wrath and Rune can chunk this thing down pretty hardcore, but if you take a look, it has armor piercing, it does have an anti-infantry bonus. It's pretty hard to kill itself. It does have, 66 round speed isn't a lot, but against the Dwarves it's a lot. So the Slayers are close to 50, so they can kind of keep up, but it's definitely not a pretty sight to see them get cut up by that guy. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So obviously very simple linear battle, not a lot of advanced tactical movement in the beginning. We're just kind of moving in. We're going to go fisticuffs. I basically just had the Rune Lord or someone else selected here and was just waiting to cast Rune and Wrath and Rune on these guys. I am getting the Dragonback Slayers and essentially just watching these Manticores, because the Manticores, if he wanted to, he could dive these Dwarf Warriors on the wing, get a nice little charge and just kind of exit out here and probably kill a few models for free. So I was doing my best to kind of just run below him and keep them mirrored and just kind of make sure they weren't landing. He also could have probably done the same thing against the Grumbling Guard, and you can see that's why I pulled those Dwarf Warriors in and then simply sent them back to their formation there in a minute. So in the front line, the Dwarf Warriors are going to engage with the Chaos Warriors. He has a slight slope advantage, but my units definitely have the buff advantage with the Rune Lord, so they're going to collapse in the front line. And it's a relatively even battle for the most part in terms of just stats, but the Chaos Warriors, I believe, have slightly higher combat stats. Let's go ahead and take a look just to answer that question. So they have 38 weapon strength with the 34 of the Longbeard, so it is a slight difference there. But you can see the Dwarf Warriors coming up, and I'm starting to form a pretty good little Death Star here. You can see the Rune Lord, he overextended a little bit, but he does have the Rune Negation, but my opponent does react by using Soul Blight, which does minus 15 armor, and it does 22% reduction on weapon damage. So his Manticore also gets in here and gets a little bit drunk, and it's definitely getting to town on some of these dwarves here. But you can see the Rune of Wrath and Rune is going off in these Chaos Warriors, and you can see the Dragonback Slayers there kind of mirroring Kolek, trying to see where he's going. But unfortunately, I don't have the mobility to keep up with the chariots, and they kind of just ride through here. Definitely a tough situation, but I noticed that I was kind of getting crumbled up here on the hill, so I actually pulled all my troops down. I didn't want them to get isolated because Kolek was kind of running over there, so I decided to pull my dwarves here and just kind of form a new battle line and just form a blob, kind of a back-to-back and just fight to the death type strategy. And it works out pretty well. I do have the stand your ground, but he also has the, looks like he does have the Star Crusher, which is very cool. But you can see I do use the Rune of Wrath and Rune. It's just the regular one. It's not the Master. You can see it's doing quite a bit of HP damage. These guys are definitely ticking down pretty quick. It obviously doesn't really kill models, but it does a ton of HP damage, so they'll go down pretty quick in the subsequent fight. So over here, I'm able to hold this flank pretty well. Some of the Dragonback Slayers did get mixed in, but I was trying to catch Kolek. But he did a really good job keeping Kolek like saturated among his troops. So you can see the Dragonback Slayers are having a little trouble finding a home, but I just keep aggressively pathing them on Kolek, and I'm hoping that they'll push through and kind of, hopefully they'll be able to, whittle through these troops here. But obviously, fighting armored units with the Dragonback Slayers is not ideal. You can see they're getting hunted around a little bit by Papa Kolek. But thankfully, there are some Peak Gate Guard here, and I don't know if they've sundered his armor yet. I don't think they have, but once they get in there and sunder his armor, and then the Slayers with their high weapon strength hit in conjunction with these guys, they're going to start working on him. You can see he's down to 18 armor now, and he's taking hundreds of damage at a time with these attacks. So it's a very ideal situation there. My opponent is landing the Manticore in this particular flank, but the Dwarf Warriors are holding up really well against these Chaos Warriors actually, but they are supported by a few Dragonback Slayers. It looks like there's one who kind of got separated from the pack, but he realized Kolek is a bit more of a threat. It looks like he's trying to get back to his boys. But the Grumbling Guard here are great. That aura obviously keeps your units fresh and healthy. And I think that was one of the determining factors as to why these units are still fighting pretty effectively here. And, these Dwarf Warriors, I mean, they're just MVPs. They're fighting this Chevron Manticore. They're doing really, really good. And they do have that charge defense, and he actually did charge them. So they were braced, I believe, so not a bad situation at all. So Kolek in here did take a bit of a beating, but the opponent wisely reacts and pulls him out, and he retargets my Runesmith. So very well played there. You got to take those guys out, and Kolek is a master at targeting heroes. He hits like an absolute truck, so it looks like he just two-shotted that Runesmith. Now again, he's not going to make contact every time, but there he certainly did, and very well. So at the same time, I am using the Rune of Wrath and Rune on this Pimp My Ride Chariot over here, and this is the Master Rune, so you can see it's at well, we didn't get to see a full tick, but I believe it was quite a bit of damage, and then I use another Rune of Wrath and Rune on it. And it's not the best situation to use it on a small regiment like that, but I had to use every ranged tool at my disposal to get this thing down, because that thing, if left unimpeded, could just run laps through my troops, and then Kolek could run away and just be a troll, and it would have been a really tough situation. So right now, we just have a very tight DAWI death blob. You can see that there's some Peak Gate Guard and pretty good health, some Longbeards. Most of my troops are really beat up though, but thankfully my Rune Lord's okay, and you can see Kolek actually launching some guys down the hill here, so definitely not a fun situation for the Dwarves. Kolek has a nice little perch on the hill. He's flanked by his own Chaos Warriors, so I'm not able to get a good surround on him. So very well played by my opponent in regards to position. You can see it's an ugly fight here. The Lore of Death is definitely pretty nasty stuff. The minus 15 armor is decent, but the leadership hit, in a close battle like this is pretty important. But the Dwarves, again, with their super high leadership, are going to definitely, stay the course. I mean, you can see these Dwarf Warriors are shaken despite the fact that they're, at what, 10% of their HP. So a really good situation there. Unfortunately for me, this Runesmith is in pretty bad shape. He's trying to flee right now. And you can see Dwarves just flying into the camera. But the Grumbling Guard are a resilient bunch, and they're led by their Thane here. And they're starting to work on Kolek, getting him down a little bit. But obviously, Kolek's a lot to handle. He looks like right now when he's buffed, he does have 618 weapon strength. Star Crusher is active again, and that's actually, I think, the second time he's used it this game. So it must have some sort of, not the longest cooldown, which is not bad. But the Thane, thankfully for me, he does have a potion still. He also has the Master Rune of Oath and Steel, which isn't exactly pertinent against Kolek. And, oh man, he just actually jumped into Kolek and got knocked away. That's pretty funny. But most of the Chaos troops are in pretty bad shape here. If you go ahead and take a look, you can see the Manticore is flying in. He has one here, both very, very low. He has a few Chaos Warriors, about 12 models here, maybe 13 here, but I still have a fair amount of healthy Dwarves, healthy being quite subjective here, but he's using that Soul Blight. It's basically constantly up, which is pretty interesting. I haven't seen it in this matchup, but I don't usually use it myself. I do like to use Spirit Leech on Dwarven Heroic units, but they do have that magic resistance, so even that isn't that effective. So Kolek kind of regrouping. He does have some forces here that are broken, but again, he's still a force to be reckoned with. He does have this Lore of Death Sorcerer, so the Dwarves are swarming Kolek right now. Hopefully we'll see some jump kicks in there, but you can see there's still some Dragonback Slayers, and then also there's Peak Gate Guard here, and they're doing a pretty good job. Let's see if his armor is sundered right now. It actually is. So even just having a few Peak Gate Guard in the end game like this is so big. They're making a big deal, because Kolek is, he's relatively tanky. I mean, he has a massive HP pool of over 6,000, so any kind of big burst of damage you can get on him is very, very valuable in the long term. But the Manticores are coming in. Of course, they can terrify in this late game here, but again, most of my army is immune to psychology, which is great. So actually pretty favorable for me in that regard. So right now I'm running laps with my Rune Lord, just trying to avoid Kolek, but he does indeed break. And that's all she wrote for the Warriors of Chaos. But it was a very close game, very well played, very, very fun. So you can see the Dwarf Warriors, they held their own. They did their part, but it's just kind of a contingency in case he did bring Chaos Knights. I just needed some fodder to throw at them. But, obviously the Warriors with great weapons did good. The Peak Gate Guard and the Grumbling Guard were truly the MVPs. And, of course, the Rune Spam was pretty good as well. His army was pretty interesting, seeing the Chaos Warriors. I mean, that's straight to business. The Manticores are pretty good. Honestly, if he just brought, more Chaos Warriors, I think I might have lost that. The Manticores, though, obviously are able to dive their heroic units and probably were part of the reason why he was able to kill both of my Runesmiths. So, yeah, tit for tat, I suppose. But, again, the Chariot was tough to deal with, but the Rune of Wrath and Rune did a pretty good job wearing it down, and it actually did break. I think its health was lower than that when the battle ended, so perhaps there's a little bit of a bug there. But really well played to my opponent, Change of War. I look forward to seeing you again on ladder, and I hope you guys enjoyed that DAWI cast. Have an excellent night, and take care.